I get Mr. Kinney to pledge allegiance and Mr. Taylor to do the invocation, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, this afternoon we're grateful for the opportunity to get together, both of our boards in our county. We thank you for just the blessings upon us. Pray for your wisdom and guidance this afternoon. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Any requests to postpone agenda items, additions, deletions, or changes in the order of presentation? Not hearing any. Can I get a formal approval of the agenda, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That brings us to our first presentation. VACO Award, Mr. Dean Lentz, please. How are you, sir?
Very good.
Good.
To recognize counties that have adopted innovative approaches to providing public services and identifying programs that could serve as models for other counties to emulate. Today, I'm proud to present Powhatan County with its third ever Achievement Award. For VACO, this is the 22nd Annual Achievement Awards program, and this year we received a record number of 145 entries for 2024. So this is truly a competitive program, as the winning entries, your all's winning entry, was selected from a panel of judges that we selected for this program. Now, our judges, they look at many different things to determine each program. And number one is, does the program offer an innovative solution to a problem? Does the program promote intergovernmental cooperation? And does the program provide a model that other counties may learn from or emulate? And fourth, is the program based on other programs from a public or private entity that represents an innovative approach or a customization of local government? And again, I said this is Powhatan County's third ever Achievement Award program, and our judges felt that this program was fantastic enough to give it an award. Now, if you don't mind, I'll tell you a little bit about the program. This program is called the Powhatan County Public Schools Locally Developed Geography Curriculum and Local History Unit. In 2023-24 school year was one of transition for our history course progression in Powhatan County Public Schools. The challenge for us was moving our Virginia Studies course down a grade level to alleviate the testing burden on our 5th grade teachers and students. This transition was successful. However, it left a gap in instructional program for the 5th grade. The solution: design an in-house geography curriculum. Our K-12 history and social studies specialist embraced the challenge, charting this new course as a result. Powhatan County Public Schools now has a robust and engaging locally developed curriculum with a strong focus on local history that sparks pride in the town in Powhatan County and celebrates the future of Powhatan County and inspires your prosperity. Historically, geographic education often overlooks local context, leaving students disconnected from the land they inhabit. This curriculum bridges that gap by immersing students in the history and geography of Powhatan County. Our local history unit aims to promote understanding of Powhatan County's rich history with an emphasis on how geographic features served as barriers for early settlers, yet praises their resilience as they developed creative solutions to address the challenges faced when interacting with the environment. Additionally, it acknowledges the original inhabitants of the land called Powhatan County, who were the Monacan people, and challenges students to ponder why our county's founders would choose Powhatan when naming the county, despite having no evidence to show that Chief Powhatan ever stepped foot in the region of Virginia. Students gain a holistic understanding of the county's development and its impact on its people. Again, it's a great program, a very unique program that we felt was worthy of a VACO Achievement Award this year. And hopefully we can recognize that now. I have a plaque. I think you have maybe your superintendent or your social studies specialist.
I think, usually I think we would probably bring our board down, so maybe we bring both boards down and as far as just as a backdrop to Patrick.
And Mr. Chair, we would like to have a photo so that we can put it in our newsletter and.
No problem.
Really mark it.
And it's our better half.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch, for that presentation and the award ceremony. So we were chosen out of 146.
Do what now? You were, yes. Yeah, this was one of the winning programs. We put it in our newsletter and, we market the Powhatan County and you can convert that. I got you. We lobby for you. We advocate for you. Thank you.
See if anybody has signed up to speak. See no one has signed up to speak. Would anybody like to speak during public comment period that didn't sign up? Not seeing any. We will move on to new business. Brings us to our legislative agenda, the 2025 session updates.
Good evening, everyone. So we have Delegate Ware here with us this evening to discuss priorities for the 2025 General Assembly session. So we'll go through these. One, the Green Ridge landfill. This is one we've carried as a priority for, I think this will be our, would be our 6th year of that. Since it was originally announced, it's been a concern for, I believe, the board and the public related to traffic on Route 60, as well as impacts to wetlands, streams, groundwater, wells, all of those things. Delegate Ware helped us and supported legislation in the 2019 session to address some of those impacts, but it was not supported or not approved by the rest of the General Assembly. We did request, there was an ongoing Route 60 traffic study with VDOT. We did successfully lobby them to include the background anticipated truck traffic into that, but again, it was just kind of incorporating what that might be. It wasn't a study directly to the landfill. So since then, it has not been taken up by General Assembly, so we would recommend that we no longer lobby to the General Assembly for that unless Delegate Ware has any insight that might have changed. But otherwise, there is the ongoing DEQ permitting process, and would suggest that that's probably the best mechanism right now for us to give our input and try and impact change for the board and for our citizens on that. Because it is still an issue, is still a concern, but with, again, trying for 5 or 6 years now, I'm not sure trying to get a bill in session is what's going to get it done.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the chance to be here. And let me just say, with Mr. Lynch here, he does in fact represent you all down there very well on any number of issues when there are particular matters that would have an effect on the county. So I'm delighted to see him here today, but I do want to note that your membership is well worth what you are part of. I know others of you probably benefited from VACO programs, but just that, an unremunerated and testimony for the work that he does down in Richmond. So, all right, and I caught part of what you, the administrator said. So if you could.
Yes. On the Green Ridge landfill, saying that you had previously helped carry legislation for us to address that, but it doesn't seem like the General Assembly, the rest of the General Assembly, not yourself, have an appetite for approving anything related to that. So, should we be looking to address that more through the DEQ permitting and other mechanisms rather than continuing to try and propose bills that won't pass?
Yeah, both myself and Senator Hashmi and I think Senator Sturtevant may have even put in a bill, several bills related specifically to landfill regulation. There were some that attempted some look back to the action taken by Cumberland because of its significant transportation impact for us here in Powhatan. So far, we have not had legislation passed, apart from, I think you mentioned the highway traffic study on Route 60, which obviously will be significantly affected by that level of traffic and that size of vehicles. There have been some considerations or concessions that the applicant up there has made, but I think that's probably the largest significance of any legislative action we've taken across the years. Obviously, one challenge would be it's in the process right now of application before the Department of Environmental Quality, so an ex post facto law would not affect them, but we continue to work and advocate on behalf of Powhatan and our interests in this question.
Any questions?
I would have a question. Only being a resident, as the crow flies about 2 miles from where the potential dump is prepared to go, is water quality, of course. They're very concerned about that. And from what I'm understanding, they have reduced the amount of, coverage that the dump was going to obtain, but also is representing for the school board. Very concerned with the traffic. And we have many school bus stops on 60, both east and west. So very concerned, with tractor-trailer drivers becoming weary with their traveling and their distancing, and, and maybe causing some harm in regards to, with our traffic stops, with our school bus stops. So if you could make sure that, reiterate that, and that's a huge concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. King.
Hey, Brett, so in regards to the Cumberland landfill, has VDOT done any kind of traffic impact studies on 60 as to what the increased truck traffic is going to look like for us?
They, as part of the rezoning, they had to do a traffic study for it. That was in Cumberland County, something their board and staff reviewed. Then we had it was called the Route 60 Corridor Preservation Study. That was a very high-level study from the Chesterfield border all the way to Amherst County. So looking at a very long span of 60. We were able to get them to, originally when they were doing that study, it was just current traffic and some future projections, but did not include the landfill. So we lobbied them with Delegate Ware and were able to get them to include future projections for that in there. But again, that didn't necessarily directly address it. It just helped us analyze intersections and see, okay, which ones will have issues, what solutions might be for that. So I would say to your question, probably the most direct would be the one that was done in Cumberland County for the rezoning case. Beyond that, there hasn't been any further study of traffic impacts, no.
Have they provided the results for us of that traffic study?
That would have been a public document. So that rezoning was several years ago. So we should have a copy still. If not, we could get one. It's in the public record. So.
Thanks, sir.
All right. If there's nothing else on that one, then we can move to the next. Then a typical trend in each year is unfunded mandates and opposing those, or at least trying to understand what the impacts are. So this is one we've had for several years. In social services, it's a quasi-federal, state, locally funded system where 85% of it is federal state funding and then 15% is local. But then partway through the year, the state funding is discontinued, and then our local has to pick up the rest of it. So a disproportionate share of local funding for that. So just generally, such unfunded mandates and things we oppose. So we would request additional funding at the state level to lower that local funding gap for social services. Then the next one is Powhatan State Park. That one, they have a master plan for adding equestrian campgrounds, cabins, family lodges, and expanded campgrounds there. Prior to COVID, we had meetings with Delegate Ware, head of DCR, as well as the governor, and looked like we were making good progress to get some more funding to start doing some of those improvements at our park. But then of course, COVID happened, and that funding was pulled. Delegate Ware was successful in getting us additional staffing at the park. It had historically been one of the lower staffed parks, and now there's additional staffing there thanks to his efforts on that. But we would like to re-engage the state on trying to get funding for the master plan improvements to continue to improve our state park, which typically happens through the governor's budget. Any questions on that one?
How much funding will we need to do phase 2 and 3? Do you have any numbers for that?
I don't have them on hand. We do because, again, we had made some good progress and had something actually drafted for their budget. So we'll have to go back and see. Those numbers would be a little old now, but we can talk to DCR and get current numbers and specific requests.
Thank you, Brett.
Mm-hmm. The next one, unfunded mandates, we propose to remove this one just because trying to limit our legislative agenda to things that are of specific interest and concern to Powhatan. Unfunded mandates are a concern across the board to all localities, and VACO does a great job of advocating for that and other localities. And Delegate Ware, always very sensitive to the impacts of legislation on local governments. So as things specifically come up, like social services or like another one I'll talk about here shortly, we'll bring those to your attention and advocate for them. But just advocating for it across the board is something that's done through VACO that we will always do, but doesn't need to be highlighted necessarily as a special initiative. It's something we're always going to oppose. Then appropriation state land for a regional fire training center. This is one that we would propose to remove for now. We were looking at the, at that time, abandoned Beaumont property up near the river at 522. The state wasn't sure what they were going to do with that property, had interest in maybe giving some of it to the state park system to expand that. We also looked at could we use it for business incubator space, or could we have a regional fire safety training facility there. But since that time, Goochland, they've made some major investments in their fire training facility, and we can use that, so we don't really see the need right now for our own. But we would like to still re-engage the state and talk to them about the future of Beaumont, what they see as far as use of that property, and how the county might have a role in that as well. So we don't have anything prepared yet on that. So for now, the old plan, we would say let's take that off of our agenda, but let's re-engage the state and our legislation on the life of that property and what role we have in it. Then the next one, public safety communication officers, so dispatch in our 911 center. We have advocated for them to have the same VRS retirement options as other law enforcement officers and first responders. JLARC did a study in 2023 and looked at that, but every year there's actually been a bill, it's been tabled and put on hold, but we still feel that that's something that would benefit not just Powhatan, but first responders across the state. That's a very difficult field. We're very fortunate that ours is generally fully staffed and well-staffed, and we have pretty good retention. Others aren't as fortunate. There's some that have significant vacancies and have a very high turnover rate, but we don't want to take that for granted. And I think this would give them the kind of retirement options that other first responders have. And that would be, if done, that would be an option. So it could be county by county where we look at it, we request VRS to do a cost study and then decide if it would make sense for us, but at least it would give those dispatch officers that option. Then also talking on the subject of 911 dispatch centers, with the advent of next-gen 911, we and other localities had to transition off of our old legacy systems, which were backed by Verizon onto the new next gen, which was great, moved us forward as far as technology goes. But going to the AT&T system is required, had significant cost increase. So again, on the subject of unfunded mandates, we would like to see the state provide some funding for that to bridge that gap between the systems, since it was state and federal mandates that required us to make that change. And then lastly, this one is of mutual interest of both bodies and something that Delegate Ware supported us in last year, but the school construction financing. There was a bill proposed last year, and this already exists for 9 other localities on the books. We would just like to have our name or the name of all localities added to this. The option to add a 1% sales tax that is only used for school construction or renovation. I think a few things to point out about this. One, if done, it has to expire within 20 years, so it wouldn't be forever. It would be a set period. But then also, this would be, if the bill is passed, it does not impose a tax. It would just give the option. So if the bill is passed, it gives us the right to consider it. First, the board would have to pass a resolution wanting to do it. then it would put it on referendum so the public, the citizens of Powhatan, get to decide if that works for them or not. So again, putting this in the state code in no way imposes a tax. It just gives Powhatan the right to decide for ourselves if this works for us. We estimated that if it was imposed, that would generate about $54 million in 10 years, or given that it's a 20-year program, in excess of $100 million for school construction or rehabilitation funding. And certainly being a sales tax, some of that is going to be paid by Powhatan citizens, but some percent of it is going to be people that are traveling here for ball sports, so they're visiting and attending. So rather than if we have to pay for those upgrades with the real estate tax, which is 100% Powhatan residents paying that, this would at least have some percentage of that coming from outside of the county in a use tax. So again, we thank Delegate Ware for supporting that last year. It ultimately was vetoed by the governor, but we would like to see that considered again this year. Those were all of the county-specific legislative priorities for this year.
Brett, I got one question about the, how many other counties were joined together? You said you was going to join other counties?
Yeah, so it currently, again, this isn't anything new. It's already in state code. It is, and I don't have the specific localities here in front of me, but I believe it's 9 localities have the ability to levy that, or have the ability to allow their citizens to decide if they want to have that. Typically when there's things like that on the books, I'm not sure it really makes sense to have those carve-outs for particular localities. It should just be an option, statewide for each locality to decide what works for them.
I think it'd be a good thing. What do you think, Delegate Ware?
Yeah, the school construction surtax or add-on to the sales tax is one that has picked up momentum. Several years ago was the first time it was successfully brought forward by one individual legislator for his locality, somewhere in Southside. Yeah, and a number of the, Halifax.
Yes.
Delegate Edmonds, now retired, brought that. It was the first one to be successful. There have been several others since. As Mr. Chardin said, there are 9 localities. So while I was initially skeptical of it as a method of raising funds, it's clear that the Commonwealth is moving that direction. There are 9 in place, and there were a number of bills for additional localities to be added to that list. And it seems to me that the Commonwealth has moved that direction. It seems to me also a legitimate way to go forward. Why should County X here have that ability and County Y not? So this year I voted in favor of that, allowing localities to put that before their citizens, should they choose to go forward with the 1% surtax on the sales tax. School construction, obviously, I don't have to tell anyone in this room, is an important and challenging and expensive proposition. It's needed in a lot of places, including Powhatan, so I will be supportive. I do think, again, as Mr. Chardin said, that there was a veto of that this year. The prospects for next year, it's hard to say.
Gotcha. I like what Brett said about not just Powhatan residents, putting all the money in. People coming in here, spending money that would also go towards that. That's a plus for us, I think. Any more questions for?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Powers.
Delegate Ware, thank you for being here with us today. I raised this issue with Mr. Chardin, and he assured me that Mr. Lynch and VACO had this well under control. But I wanted to mention it to you just to highlight it, and that is, I'm led to believe that there are some movements afoot in the General Assembly to reduce local prerogative and to tell us that thou shalt place solar facilities, for instance, you are going to do it because the state will mandate it, or also the issue of potentially of affordable housing being dictated to the localities. And I want to encourage you to try to work against those sorts of things and taking our prerogatives from us and pulling them to the state.
That's an easy one for me. I've sat where you sit as a member of the Board of Supervisors for a couple of terms, and and sat through and made the difficult decisions on a number of zoning cases. And it seems to me, on both of those cases, that those decisions are best handled locally. Number one, that the state should not mandate the placement of multifamily dwellings from the state level, nor, as one bill proposed this time, should the state take the prerogative on deciding where solar facilities will be put in the locality and give that to the State Corporation Commission, a very fine agency with a lot of virtues, but without the direct connection with the ordinary citizen who would be affected by those solar farms or solar arrays. And I think it's those decisions are best left here. I would not support either of those initiatives, but I fully expect them to come back.
Thank you for that clarification. And Mr. Lynch, thank you for your efforts in that regard.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Ms. Smith.
Yes. Good evening. Glad to have you here. What would be a Plan B for counties not being able to pass a 1% tax to create this pool of money for construction?
I'm not sure I see a Plan B, apart from continued support, both at the state and the local level. I mean, you know what the possibilities are for you. I know what the possibilities are as we look at the state budget. But I don't see a specific enactment that would be a Plan B.
So no pool of monies that are there, somewhere out there that could be reallocated to counties that aren't successful in passing? Because whether we're allowed to put it on the ballot or not, or to incorporate it for the people to select or not to select, we still have that need of money to reconstruct and keep our buildings up to safe codes. So again, would it all fall back on the localities for that funding, to provide that funding?
Historically, as you probably know, most of the capital costs have been shouldered by localities across the years. The state has in the literary fund in decades past, and in several specific enactments, provided some construction money, but it's historically been the province of and the decision of the localities how they would do that. I think, and Mr. Lynch may be able to help me with specifics, I know Delegate O'Quinn in the House, and there was a Senate companion bill, provided a very substantial infusion of construction money for schools, and I can't give you the chapter and verse, but it was a very substantial pot of money that became available, and it will be on a rolling basis going forward. But that's kind of the general state of where we are.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mick.
I have inquired with several people. I have not talked to you about this. I'm very confused about the lottery money. I know that when the lottery was voted in, the profits were going to the school. So I saw that lottery had like $984 million, I believe, 983 profit. And basically, I figured out it's almost like a shell game. I hate to kind of say that, but that money, that profit goes to the state, but it's really helping fund money to the schools that we were going to get anyway. So it's helping the state pay their bill to the individual localities. I would like to see legislation to make that lottery money go into, as we're talking about, capital needs. You know, our schools aren't not in perfect shape, but they're in a heck of a lot better shape than a locality like the city of Richmond. So is there something that can be done about that? I just feel like people have been really, my personal opinion, misled by the lottery funds, that it really isn't, you know, I kind of saw that and I was like, oh, when am I getting my check from the lottery profit? But it doesn't work that way. Any comment or thoughts on that?
Actually, it does work that way. it comes back to the localities. There is in state code a requirement, and off the top of my head, I think it's 45% of all the revenues that come in go back to the localities. The other, don't quote me exactly, but it's roughly half goes back to the people who play the lottery in the awards. And there's a 5% administrative fee for local stores that handle lottery
Right there.
tickets and so on. And there's a certain amount for the lottery itself for administration. But and again, Mr. Lynch, I probably can give you chapter and verse. I believe it's 45% that comes back across the Commonwealth to the localities. So each portion of lottery proceeds is designated, and that money has come since the outset and continues to come in that amount to the localities.
But I thought it was part of what we get anyway from the state. The amount that we get from the state is based, maybe Mr. Lynch, on SOQs, composite index and all that, that say the lottery didn't have a profit, we'd still get the same amount of money from the state based on funding. Am I incorrect in that?
The state each year directs a certain amount. There's SOQ
Yes.
funding, which is the largest single
Yes.
part, and then there are a variety of other elements that come back to you. And again, your folks, I'm sure in the superintendent's office and the business office of the schools, they can tell you what are all the other elements. Those have continued and do continue. The lottery funding is a part of what comes back to the localities from the Commonwealth.
Mr. Lynch, do you want to come up to the table up here and join in?
Piggyback on
Sure.
Skip Man, what he's
Yeah.
talking about.
Have a seat, sir.
That is true, that is true, and, but while you may not see it as lottery money coming back, it comes through DOE. And through DOE this year, this upcoming year, we'll be a re-benchmarking. And so with that re-benchmarking, we hope to see the additional lottery money, additional dollars going in to DOE for those contracts. And so it would increase your localities' revenue for that purpose.
Mr. Chairman, what's the formula for distribution of that money? How do you prioritize the money?
I couldn't tell you how the Department of Education prioritizes that money. From my standpoint, I would say that money's kind of fungible at the Department of Education, and it's based on the administration's priorities. So I would look to the Board of Education at their priorities also.
And I
Delegate Ware?
guess that's my point.
Yeah,
And I represent counties, I don't.
right, to Ms. Hurt's point, though, is it possible to earmark those funds specifically to capital issues, to capital facility issues? And prioritize them based on some formula of need?
I can say that if you've got a will to do that, from VACO's standpoint, we would be more than happy to work with a legislator, to find a legislator who will put a budget amendment in, budget language in, to do something like that. To be more transparent. I mean, there is transparency, through the Department of Education, but it's really difficult. I mean, they don't put that out there for everybody to understand. And, I think it probably could be.
That's exactly my point. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. I think everybody wants to know where the money's going at one point, so it would be nice. Go ahead.
You did look at me for the 1%.
Yes, sir.
1% piece.
Yes.
Just know that that Delegate Ware was very instrumental in helping us get this passed this past year. It passed the House.
Mm-hmm.
It passed the Senate. We thought that this bill was veto-proof to give every locality the ability to do this, to ask their citizens whether they wanted to do this. But again, it went to the governor and it was vetoed. I really think the administration felt like this was a tax increase. Oh, I know that's what they felt like it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it fell on deaf ears. You know, it is in our legislative program this upcoming year again. We know that there is going to be a push to do this, and so it'll be back at you. And again, you know, grassroots advocacy is everything. So you will be hearing from us. We'll be asking you to reach out, make some calls, to talk to your legislators about it. See if we can get a little bit more push on this and try to educate this administration that this is not a tax increase. All it is just asking the citizens if they want to do this, and putting it out for referendum.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
If I could actually ask for a little more clarification on the 1% sales tax. So I'm understanding that it would come back to the counties, that the counties can then put it out to the voters for them to approve that they want this additional 1% tax. Can you clarify what that tax will be on? For example, that would help myself understand and also everyone in the community. So let's say you come into Powhatan County, you go out to dinner for $54, 1% would be a 54-cent additional tax for that particular meal. Does it apply on just food? Does it, I understand it would not apply to groceries because of that, but let's say a large purchase. So if I wanted to upgrade my Kubota tractor and I spent a $30,000 here in Powhatan, we have Kubota. I think I say that right. I think of the Japanese hibachi grill as well. But so if I was to buy a Kubota tractor here in Powhatan from our local Land and Coats, would that 1% tax apply to that as well?
Anything that is currently under the purview of the sales tax, you'd have 1% more sales tax on that item, whatever it was.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Any more questions from Mr. Ware?
One more, because it says 1% or up to 1% is determined by the governing body. So the local governing body could, in actuality, apply more than a 1%.
Up to.
Yes or no?
Up to. So you could do 0.5% theoretically,
Up
correct?
to 1%.
Correct.
Okay. 0.75%. So no more than 1% is the better way to explain it then. No more than 1%. Thank you.
Any more questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, one more, if you
Mr.
could.
Powers.
Ask Brett first, if I could. The issue of replenishment of ambulances coming back from a call, having to have that replenishment done at the locality, at a fire station, as opposed to the hospital. We got that, is that covered in a non-issue at this point? Because I know it was mandated, but it's certainly unfunded by the state.
Yeah, and that was, my understanding, that actually came from a federal mandate.
Okay.
And to give a little more explanation for everybody, previously, when an ambulance would have distribute medication, they would go back to the hospital and get a new medication box that's complete, have everything in it. I think hospitals no longer want to do that. They don't want the cost, liability, whatever it is. So at the federal level, they had a new mandate that localities have to handle that individually. So now we have to basically have our own pharmacies, essentially. We need to purchase those, track those, which, you know, is very important, the tracking and security of them, replenish them, all of that. So for us here locally, we believe we have it covered. It's an unfunded mandate. It's not great, but it's not huge. It's in the, you know, probably tens of thousands of dollars. For some larger localities, they have to essentially stand up entire new departments out of nowhere and do it by November, which is the deadline. So for some bigger localities, it's a huge unfunded mandate. We'll get by. We'll be okay. But that, you know, the state could potentially play a role in that. But again, my understanding, and maybe you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is that was a federal mandate, not a state one.
So that's a thank you card to our friends at the federal level.
And the hospital systems, yes.
Good point, Mr. Powers.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Mr. Sheridan, if I could also ask some further clarification as far as the 911 dispatchers and the VRS retirement benefit, which I think is amazing. But I have also heard over the last several years, Delegate Ware, that they've also been struggling for the 911 dispatchers to receive recognition, that they are first responders, and that they should also not be deemed as glorified secretaries. So is that part of the same process that we're asking request, or should we, request that a little further?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not specific to the VRS legislative priority, but I think that's overall in the theme that we believe they should be treated as equal, first responders, because they are an integral part of that system, and they're usually the first of the first taking that call. So that's something that our 911 dispatch team has been advocating for to the governor. There's also the Valor Awards. The Mayor of the Valor Awards historically have not always been available to 911 dispatchers, so we've been advocating that they should as well, because they play a critical role, and the toll that on them, especially the mental toll for what they have to deal with and hear, is often unseen. And we also, our 911 dispatch center director, Mr. Nolan, he'll be attending VACO, so he's trying to take more of a hand in helping advocate for 911 dispatchers at the state legislative level, and having a committee that looks at those awards and those recognitions and things for 911 dispatchers as well. So yeah, we're trying to do more to put 911 dispatch on the forefront and elevate them to an equal standing, so not just with the VRS, but with other recognitions and things as well.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Kenny.
So one question that kind of confuses me on that issue, Brett. So isn't the 911 dispatchers part of the sheriff's department?
Here in Powhatan County, a lot of places they are. Historically, they were here. When we revamped it, probably 2016, somewhere around that 2016 timeframe, everybody, the board, sheriff's department, administration got together and decided that for us, it would be best to house it under administration. And we're fortunate to have a great sheriff and sheriff's department. A lot of places that would be a turf war that, it's just something for better or for worse, I'm going to own it. We don't have that. If our sheriff feels it's best served the citizens to have it under admin, then that's what we do, and that's what we did. So here in Powhatan, 911 dispatch is an administrative function, but works extremely closely with our sheriff's office, of course.
So theoretically, the board could reintegrate them into the sheriff's department, and then they would get the same benefits that law enforcement personnel would get, correct?
I don't think that's the case. A good question. We could look at that and see, but I don't think so, because I believe VRS classifies them, whether they're part of the sheriff's office or not separately. But I'll verify to make sure the fact that we pulled them out of the sheriff's office hasn't penalized in some way. But I think even if we reintegrated them with the sheriff's department, I think we would still be in the same position, that VRS doesn't recognize them as law enforcement officers.
Tracking. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Any more on the legislative agenda? Mr. Ware, would you like to say anything?
Just a couple of things. I would say I have spoken to the 911 dispatchers. We've been in touch and had conversations, and there have been bills proposed on that question. What we're talking about, and this is important to note, this is enhanced retirement, more than a teacher, more than most other state employees. Enhanced retirement is available currently for law enforcement officers so designated. And there are a number of specific groups of law enforcement officers that are included under the enhanced retirement. And has a significant price tag. It shortens the required number of years. It adds to the benefits of those who receive them. It's not a judgment on my part as to whether that should or should not be the case. But each time we've added a group of people to these enhanced retirements, it's a significant budgetary decision. You're talking statewide, and it's an important matter. That said, the 911 folks do make a very significant case that some of the circumstances that they hear and have to deal with as they take people through life-threatening circumstances, it's a tough job. They go home with some tough things to deal with. So, I know it's an ongoing conversation. So far, we have not been able to see the way to make it happen.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Chair, so I just, first of all, Mr. Ware, thanks for being here with us tonight. I just have one more follow-up question regarding what my colleague, Mr. Powers, brought up earlier. How much pressure are you getting from the state regarding affordable housing in localities, forcing that on a locality?
The pressure comes when legislation is proposed and if it makes it out of committee to the floor. I'm not on the committee that hears that directly, probably be most likely in the Committee on Counties, Cities, and Towns. It has not emerged from that committee, to the best of my knowledge, for further consideration. There is a significant pressure. Affordable housing and the problems of homelessness have been a significant matter of discussion on a variety of, in a variety of ways. There's been talk about altering how affordable housing is assessed to make it yet more affordable. There have been a variety of proposals brought forth to try and face the challenge that so many Virginians faced for housing, but so far at least, that legislation has not emerged for full consideration in the legislature.
Thank you, sir. Any more comments? Mr. Ware, Mr. Lynch, thank you for coming today. Thank you for that award. Thanks for all you do. Go ahead, Ms. Smith.
The students have some things to talk about, too.
Okay.
Okay?
Mhm.
I thought you were leaving
No.
on Mr. Ware.
No. I'm just taking it for this part.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The schools do have our legislative priorities as well. One that I know keeps repeating itself is the July 2023 JLARC study of Virginia's K through 12 funding formulas and recommendations. And obviously, we also, as most of our colleagues in the education field, are looking for an elimination of the cap on support positions, reinstating the non-personal cost categories that were removed in the recession of FY09 and FY10. And, we're also looking for an adjustment in that SOQ formula for central office positions. Those are just to name a few of the main issues with staffing, other than we would also say that in leveraging talent, it is getting more and more difficult as our institutes of higher education do not produce enough teachers to meet the needs of the state of Virginia. There are, I think schools and even the Virginia Department of Ed are doing a great job of trying to figure out ways to get more people into education and creating different pathways, but those come at a cost. There's a cost to, first of all, we know supply and demand impacts cost on everything. And, we would like to see our teachers here in Virginia be above the national average. We provide, I think, some of the information provided around businesses wanting to come to Virginia speaks to the quality of education that they feel that they would get, so that it's a pipeline for their employees and for their employees' children. Our teachers deserve to be compensated, for the work they're doing. And we also have a lot of additional costs related to professional development of those who did not participate in traditional teacher preparation programs. And so those are some of the items we are definitely in support of. And also a superintendent's license or a license for a candidate, a teacher candidate, based on superintendent's recommendation, because if we have someone that's performing well and producing good quality results with our students, giving superintendents the ability to say that that individual needs to maintain their teaching license. Specifically under special education, we're supporting any necessary modifications to 8 VAC 20-81-210 and requiring parental requests for due process hearings to be handled by licensed attorneys. The attorneys work under a code of ethics, and that is so important when we're advocating for our most at-risk kids to make sure they are getting a good education with the supports that they need. Also on student wellness, looking for additional mental health supports. The schools have become a main provider of the mental health supports since COVID. And, being able to have additional funding, not just for school counselors, while we do appreciate the additional supports that have been advocated for, but we also need psychologists, social workers, behavior specialists. And we need to be realistic about what these cost when we're trying to fund those supports for school. I can keep going, or I can give you guys a chance to talk. The other thing is dual enrollment. There's been a huge push for additional dual enrollment for students and making it available to every student in the high school level. And while I think that's really good, and there's ways to even look at how do we provide dual enrollment in some of the career and workforce development areas, there is a cost to the localities for it or to parents currently. And if the current statements that are being made about it, the goal is not to have it cost parents, we don't want to see it cost the localities either. And one of the issues is having quality educators that can teach those dual enrollment courses. And right now, it is very difficult due to the accreditation model for the for the community colleges to take our teachers, but our teachers in our high schools are the ones that connect with students. They are committed to it. It is not that we receive tuition and, well, they do as they want. They come to school with the intent of getting a high school diploma, and if that comes with college credits or even an associate's degree, that's a bonus. But our teachers are dedicated to seeing them across the finish line. And so having that have some value in the education they have and what they can do in the classroom is important. And when I hear that some of the push is that, well, the community colleges will provide a virtual option. Well, one, there's still a cost to localities because someone still has to monitor the students, but also we know from the history of 2020 to 22 what impact virtual learning had on our students. So to me, making that a viable option is not the appropriate thing to be doing. And then the other legislative priorities we have are related to the new assessment, the accountability and accreditation, and really looking at absenteeism, and rather than all absences can lead to chronic absenteeism, is the difference between excused and unexcused absences. And so being able to also not only splitting them, but asking, let's provide a definition, what is excused and what is unexcused, and utilize that for the calculation. When we have kids that are immunocompromised, and when they're coming to school sick, it feels like we're encouraging people to come to school when they are truly sick. And I know what we want is kids who are not sick to be in school every day. And so it's trying to keep those two things separate. Whereas now when we're saying all absences can add up to a truancy, that's a hard thing for us as schools to control. and to help support. And that's really the highlight of what our priorities are. I'd say the last one is really related to our English language learners. That is a growing group of students here in Powhatan. And the new accreditation model is tied, it had been tied to that they had a chance to come in and learn the language before they were assessed, but they weren't counted in the accreditation process. Whereas we've moved from 11 semesters to become fluent, because you're not just asking them to be able to communicate, you're asking them to be able to learn in the new language, to 3 semesters, which really equates the way the formula works to really about 1 year in the system. Their second year, their testing counts just like a child who was born here and has spoken English since the day they learned to talk. So those are our priorities as a school division. So thank you. We appreciate your support, Delegate Ware, and the work that's done to help support schools and teachers.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Sir. Let's let Delegate Ware respond.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If you,
Thank you, Dr.
yes,
Taylor.
sir. Thank you for being here.
And I appreciate this. Some of this, particularly on the new accreditation standards, some of those specifics I was not aware of course, and they have been enacted administratively, not legislatively.
Correct.
Hopefully, some of that can be corrected or revisited administratively, as well as, not to say that there won't be legislation to address some of those things. I will say, let me begin sort of at the overall level. As you know, I taught for 32 years, the largest share of it right in Powhatan schools. So these items, many of these things are very dear to my heart. And
We know.
we're talking about people, in many cases, I've got quite a few former students who are now teachers here. And these things come very close to my heart and experience.
And you want them to stay in education.
One of the things that we did over the last few years, and I think I can't give you the exact numbers, but the percentage of increase for SOQ funding for teachers' salaries, I think I can say without contradiction, the last 3 years would surpass any 3 years in memory in terms of the percent growth. So there's been a concerted push. Some of it from the JLARC report, which certainly has gotten the attention of a lot of folks. I'll say, for example, when I went to Chesterfield last year for this same kind of a meeting, the entirety of the meeting, there was one topic, the JLARC report. And I think that that focus is entirely appropriate and has been taken into account in state funding for a variety of things, but starting with schools. So I think that's one of our highest jobs, is to meet that requirement. The question of support positions being restored, we have pushed toward that. My sense is we've done a little bit toward that, but we've never, obviously haven't gotten all the way back since the Great Recession and Governor Kane years. That does take us back a ways now. But I know there's a considerable impetus to try and address that. It's a large amount, but it's important. One thing you mentioned that I had not heard exactly in that vein has to do with the superintendent having permission on teacher licensure. It seems to me that there's some real potential value to that, because you and the board and your principals are closest to who comes in to teach. I always have been concerned that teacher licensure can be very bureaucratic and not allow some very capable people to serve who would be able to serve and do well in that position. Is that something that's actually...
Right now, we can do a 1 year, but 1 year only.
Okay.
And that needs to be continued if, as from my perspective, that if we're responsible for the progress of our students, we're going to care about the quality of the teacher. And so if we feel someone, they have a college degree, they might not have a teaching certificate, but they are amazing in the classroom with the kids, and their kids are performing well, then we should be able to continue that on. And this was a stopgap, so it's not something that we want to even continue, moving forward. So we would like to see it more permanent, because we all know with a limited pipeline, it's going to be a long time before we're able to change things and get back to where we have adequate staffing.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Mrs. Surt, you had a question?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. You've always been such a huge supporter of everything in Powhatan schools, and you've answered a lot of questions for me. I mean, my struggle being on the school board is funding everything that we need in our schools to give our kids the absolute best. And it can't all come from the local government, as we know, and we want as much from the state as we can possibly get. And that's why I did a lot of research, talked to a lot of people looking for where can we get more money out of the state. And Dr. Tigan can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe right now that we have over 200 positions that are not SOQ funded in our school. Is that correct, Dr. Tigan?
That was correct last year.
You don't know right now.
It would be similar this year, though.
So to me, if we said, okay, we're going to get rid of these people, our schools would not, do the great job that we're doing right now. And that's what I really want legislatures, you understand it because you're an educator, but there are people that aren't. And when I've, been down and talked to different people from different localities, they are like, I even question if they really know what SOQs are sometime. I don't mean to throw a zinger, but, it's pretty serious. I mean, you can't have an elementary school without an assistant principal. And, that's absolutely insanity. And so that's where I'm really concerned of finding funds from the state. And I know it rests with the Virginia Department of Education, a lot of it, but obviously the General Assembly, there are elected officials at the state level and have control, over the education. And the way the composite index is done really concerns me. And, that's why I started looking to the lottery and all these places, because as you're well aware, we have a pretty big capital chunk that needs to be done in the next very near future. So I started trying to find where is the money. And also, we have a pretty big learning loss still from COVID, and we're looking at all, and the Department of Education has stepped in with different programs to try to help, but it's still not enough to catch all our kids up. And we all know that if we don't have kids that are well educated, their future is not good at all. So we still have kids that need a lot of help, and it costs money for the extra things. There's special ed kids that need a lot of help, that require a lot of funds. So, that's my struggles, is just trying to find anywhere I can squeeze more blood out of the turnip, so to say. So any assistance in that area by either one of you two gentlemen would be hugely appreciated.
I will say, certainly, education is by far the largest element of the state budget. It's hovered between 31 and 33% for most of the time I've been in the legislature. You add public colleges and universities, 50% of our discretionary general fund goes to education. One other area that's growing a good deal is health expenditures. That's probably the biggest single growth area, and much of that we have virtually no control over. And then you have parks and corrections and a variety of other things that we do. But I would have to say, and this is something I can say I think without contradiction, this is one of the places where there is a bipartisan agreement that schools are the priority. They are the largest and will, I think, for as far as we can see, continue to be the largest single expenditure from the Commonwealth. I don't see that changing.
But I guess we need more, is where I'm coming from.
Well, I'm going to turn the tables on a question that I got. Which tax would you like us to increase?
The 1% sales tax that we can vote on. Thank you.
Yeah, that is a good point. When we're talking about money, where's the money come from? It always comes from the taxpayers' pockets. And so our General Assembly's in a tough spot, our governor's in a tough spot. None of us want to have increased taxes, but the only way to get more money is to increase taxes. So it's a catch-22. Are there any other questions from board members?
I do.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes. I would like to say, any chance you get to always up the teacher salaries is muchly appreciated. Been there, done that. I always was very appreciative of that, a salary increase. One of the other things that we see coming down is there often are grants that are out there, and the wording in these particular grants eliminate Powhatan County because it says we don't have a low enough income, we don't have enough diverse community, but we still have the need that they're offering the grant for. And we put together a great plan for that, to use that money, but we get turned down for that particular those particular reasons. And it just seems kind of unfair. They don't, when it's an opportunity to use some money in a good place to help fix something for our kids, we shouldn't be just denied on those reasons, in my opinion. And then I'd like to also speak about, under the special education, about advocates. This is not in any way to say we don't need advocates, because they do, parents do. Going through the special ed process is very difficult, but we need advocates that are goal-oriented, that have a positive impact on the situation with the families and the schools, and that they have a willingness and a desire to accomplish the goal that is the best for the school system and for the student. Those advocates need guidelines. They just do. We all have to live by guidelines and rules and direction. They should not be turned loose wild in a due process hearing, in the courts. It just shouldn't happen. It's not fair to all of the people that go to these due processes, that prepare for them, and the work that is put into it, and it be just destroyed and torn up because there's an advocate that doesn't know how to behave themselves in a public setting. Again, we need those guidelines put in place. And what I'm hearing is they need to be legislatively written.
I don't disagree, and the superintendent will remember we had a conversation, she and I, and a member or two of the school board, and that's precisely the point that I made at the time. When you have a guardian ad litem in the courts, they're under the direction of the courts.
Yes.
It's a not unlike circumstance when you have that in a court setting. It seems to me that there ought to be some kind of, be it licensure, or be it some accountability, people who do that, as you are suggesting. A couple of challenges. I did see, and I was pleased to see, your advocacy for attorneys handled only by licensed attorneys. That's a possibility going forward. One of the challenges in the area of special ed is that much of it is of the law and regulations promulgated not in Richmond, but in Washington. So what is permitted for us to do in Virginia obviously will have a bearing on the extent to which we can make that kind of a determination legislatively in Richmond. But I'd certainly be glad to consider that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
So this is probably more of a question for you, Dr. Tigan, regarding student wellness. So do you guys, and I don't mean to be insensitive to the students, but do you guys have programs that get the parents involved if if there's issues with the student, because increased local funding for psychiatrists, social workers, and behavior specialists, I would think the parents would be able to identify something like that at home, and that if somebody needed counseling, that's something that maybe they should look into and not put that burden on the school, because then what you're going to do is you're going to come back to the county and you're going to ask for more money for that. And, you know, y'all know how tight our budgets are and why we may want to accommodate that. We just, you know, are currently unable to.
There's two sides to this. One is that their psychologists and social workers are needed as part of required assessments, again, going back to federal laws, with students when you're doing like a triennial evaluation on a student that, you know, or you're looking for eligibility for a student as to whether they have a disability. Those assessments are required. You know, we can't even find a social worker. We don't have one, haven't had one for 2 years as far as being able to have someone in-house. Partially that's related, I think probably significantly related to the cost of what, or the available income they can make on the private sector versus with us. So we have to go through the private sector to be able to hire. And so we are paying more, but we're not having someone that's available to us all the time. Now, when it comes to private counseling, we try to connect families. We do have a grant currently that allows us to do some work in the schools with kids if they are currently seeing a counselor, you know, through like the Community Services Board outside through the Powhatan-Goochland CSB, you know, that they can get counseling through there, but then we have a grant where someone will come in from that same entity to help kids navigate their way through. How does that translate from home to school and school to home? But we don't, you know, we try to do the minimum amount of counseling. It isn't considered to be an outside parent need, but there are times and places when, you know, we're doing threat assessments on kids. I cannot tell you how many threat assessments we do on kids at this point on a daily basis for threats being made, and that we take everything seriously and we have to address it. So these are needs that while we wish we didn't have to do them in a school, because I agree with you, we are an instructional institution that should be teaching kids. These things over time have fallen more onto schools. I get pressure all the time to be teaching parenting classes. I've asked about DSS providing, you know, classes. That hasn't happened. I've talked to the courts. You know, can our courts through the juvenile probationary officer, other localities, their courts will provide some you know, so it's not always reactive. Why can't we be proactive before kids get in that situation? So those are things that someone needs to take them on. While we'd rather it not be the schools, it always tends to be the schools because the problems that they're having are impacting their behaviors at school, their ability to learn at school, and thereby our outcomes at school. So, you know, I absolutely hear what you're saying. But that is the basic premise is, I guess the buck stops at schools, because if it's not happening anywhere, we're going to fail as an institution. And when we fail, children fail, and that's not an option for us.
Is there any other questions from members of the school board or supervisors?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Powers?
Delegate Ware, I've recently become more aware of career workforce development and what's going on in Powhatan County. And I think from my perspective, we've made good strides in the county, but I would ask you, as you have opportunity in the General Assembly and as you influence your colleagues, to really put a lot of emphasis on career workforce development. All of our kids aren't destined to go to college. And as we all know, if you go out to try to get a plumber or an HVAC person, you know what you're paying for that service. So it just is a viable avenue for a lot of young people to pursue that don't want to go the pure academic route, and who come out of a program in high school with a career and without a whole lot of debt. So it's just a program that if you're able to give it a little extra push, I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Delegate Ware, as far as the workforce development, I would also like to put an extra emphasis on that. We here at Powhatan, we're taking a lot of pride in what we're doing for our students at the high school level, and even encroaching into the middle school and elementary, because of course your elementary children, what do you want to be when you grow up? What type of career? So we can really start, helping the children have an other option besides college. Unfortunately, our nation, my personal opinion, for the last 30, 40, 50, maybe longer than that, has really been focused on college, college, college. And again, I completely agree. It is not for everyone, and it might not be for them at that point in time in their life. I received my registered nurse degree at a later in life. But I have a high school graduate who graduated from Powhatan last year, and he went into the welding field, and with zero debt is now currently working for the Newport News Shipyard, making $25-28 an hour. So we have so many careers that we can direct our students to go in those directions. But again, from the legislations, sorry about that, but from the state and also national level, everything, the emphasis is always on college education. And if you could help kind of steer and maybe direct more money into that, that would be greatly appreciated as well. And I guess the only other thing is, on this wellness and the SOQs. On the wellness, I've had several constituents speak to me many times about their children being ill, but they're receiving letters from us, from the school division, that your child's been sick this many days and you're at risk of. But that force is coming from VDOE, from the state level, because then we won't receive money if we don't have our children in the seats. But let's say if you take a family of 4 and you get a cold or the flu runs through that home, every child is going to have that, or more than likely go through that. But then they'll be the carrier, and they'll just take it back into the school and wipe out the schools even more. You see that when we have these little, stomach epidemics and things. So I would like to see the VDOE maybe not necessarily put so many mandates on us as a local level, and allow us as a school board and our superintendent for us to be able, as we say, grassroots, to apply either rules specific and/or how we spend our money. Do we have to have a certain amount of seats? That's the one struggle that I have found. I've only been on this board since January, is we're mandated to spend a certain amount of money on certain things, and we may or may not need that. But in a way, we're forced to spend that money in that capacity, whereas we could have the ability to say, move that bucket of funds over to something that is far more useful for us as we see. So if you could just take that conglomerate of comments to heart, I appreciate that. Thank you. You do an amazing job. I've respected you for many years. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? All right, well, I'll just reemphasize what Mrs. Smith said as far as the advocacy. That is big time for me. I just look at the amount of money that not just our school division, but I'm sure other school divisions as well, are spending on an area that if there was greater qualifications for that, we could use that money for positions. I mean, some of the stuff that we're talking about, we need more money for more SOQs and all that. We could fund those if we had a greater level of entry into this advocacy requirements to get into it in a code of ethics. So I concur with Mrs. Smith and our proposal. Thank you so much for being here. I'll turn it over to Mr. Cologne.
just, if I could just kind of follow up on that, because it looks like you're going on to the next item on your
Yes, sir.
agenda. A couple of things I would note. One is on unfunded mandates. I do feel and have been where you are, and when I see them come, as they do, and most frequently it's the schools, not only the schools, some of the other zoning and other matters that we've mentioned. It's one of the times when I occasionally will stand on the floor of the House and say, we're telling people to do this, but we're not sending them any money to do it, however good an idea it may be. So I do push back on unfunded mandates and will always do so, because there are times when it needs to be, if we're going to mandate something, that we need to fund it as well. I would note on the vocational, I do think that workforce is such an important thing, and I think we have. I was on the academic side, but as I think of some of my colleagues on the vocational side, some of them were among the most effective teachers and the most helpful in bringing some of our students into a very successful career after school. So I completely am on the same page, and I think there is more broadly an increasing sense of the importance of that. And I will note that my most senior colleague, the fellow who has the #1 license plate, is a career agriculture teacher and a wonderful legislator, but he's also a good advocate for those things. And one other thing I will mention just thinking going forward as we get together, it is really helpful sometimes if there are Powhatan-specific matters, whether it's legislation or funding. It was the boards here that brought to me the necessity of getting another staff member at the Powhatan State Park. It was you all who came up with that. We were fortunate enough to find that funding, and we can continue to do those kinds of things together. So as you're thinking about this, whether it's in the weeks after we've met today or whether it's in 2025, that's always helpful as we go forward. That was a specific budget amendment, for example, for the state park ranger, and it's a great feeling of accomplishment to be able to do things of that nature. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the information you've brought and the chance to be with you this afternoon. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you. You want to lead this, Brett?
Yeah, so the next topic, talking about the Pocahontas Landmark Center and the overall property here. So in 2022, or even prior to that, both of these boards had been looking at the property here, the wing behind the occupied area, the gym, and what's the future, what to do with those, as well as the grounds here. At that time, when we were looking at this, the county had done some studies and thought about using the unoccupied wings, possibly redeveloping those into like some workforce training or a business incubator type space. EDA did a study of that, got with some contractors to get some rough estimates. We can share those with you. Those studies were done. But as I recall, it was significant roof replacement, HVAC work that would need to be done in the millions of dollars. There was no funding for that ultimately, and we have no longer pursued those plans. And now, in fact, you'll be looking and considering, as we've been talking about, funding to actually demolish those wings as they are unused and continue to degrade. Also in 2022, we were, I would say, in the infancy of talking about the community center, or at that time, it was probably still the senior center we were talking about, and thought the possibility could be to house it here, possibly behind the building. Since then, we've focused more on that, looking at community center. As you're well aware, we've done the study on that with some potential sites, and this one would no longer likely be the favored location for it. So one of the keys of this resolution when it was done was anticipated that the school board would transfer this property to the Board of Supervisors for possible future development. Both of those things that we were kind of envisioning and thinking about that time now are no longer in the county's plan, so we have no plans to develop this property beyond the immediate future of what we are doing. But in trying to further this resolution that both bodies did pass, we did meet several years ago. After this, had a surveyor come out, look at exactly how would we divide up the property and draw the lines. Started to get a little complicated then when looking at the shared system. So drawing a line on the ground would be easy, but then if it's bisecting a well, sewage systems, boilers, things like that, that have joint maintenance, joint responsibility, you know, do they go with schools, do they go with county? Ultimately, we could draw the lines wherever. That's not the hardest thing. But then we started looking more at how the systems here are conjoined, the heating and cooling, the fire alarms, electricity, water and sewer, and then other things like if we transfer the property, parking lot, snow removal, would that be a school priority or a county priority? Each of us are going to have different priorities for how quickly we get a snowplow out here. You know, school's first mission is going to be open schools, not open county facilities. So as we started to really talk through this and all the logistics and how we work together with it, and some of those plans to develop the property kind of went by the wayside, we stepped back and said, well, is transferring the property to the county the right thing right now, or is that just an unnecessary step that complicates it? And my understanding is schools would favor keeping ownership of that property, and we just continue to work together and occupy the space in the gym area, either under a lease or an MOU or a license agreement, but ownership would stay with schools. We can do it either way. I think keeping it simple like that probably makes more sense on our end, but you know, whatever the will of both bodies is, we can do. And we have in tandem started to develop both a lease if we were to keep ownership in the schools and we lease the facility. We've also been developing an MOU if we were to go forward with a property transfer, and then how do we share in cost and mutual maintenance and scheduling and all of those things. You know, before we can really finalize one, we need to get direction from both bodies that, you know, either we're going with the direction from 2022 that we're going to transfer the property and do an MOU, or we would rather change course, keep ownership within schools for now, and do a lease. And so with that direction, then we can go forward, finalize it, and bring something back to both bodies to complete. But that's kind of where we stand today, just looking for some direction from both bodies. I mean, the fact is, the systems are integrated here, so whether we draw a line, transfer the property, or whatever, we're always going to have to work together. And some of those shared costs, we need to make sure it's equitable, that schools isn't carrying more of a burden for utilities or upkeep or things that are benefiting county. But at the end of the day, it's all the same money. It's all taxpayer money that we're dividing up between us for these things. So we can figure it out. So either way, we're going to have to work together to the future. We will work together for the future, and we can pursue whatever ownership agreement the boards prefer. But before we spend money and time further on that, you know, we want to regroup and get direction from you all to move forward as you all would see fit today.
Any thoughts?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
So Brett, correct me if I'm wrong, but the property was never deeded to the school. They still own it, correct?
Correct.
Deeded to us. It was just agreed that, you know, well, we could give it to you. We may, as it says here, may convey the title of real estate, but they never convey the title of real estate, correct?
Correct. It still remains in schools.
And so currently, there's pickleball courts and stuff like that I assume Parks and Rec is using.
Yes.
And the school board's not getting any compensation for that because of why?
For the pickleball courts?
Right.
Yeah.
So they own the property, but Parks and Rec, which is part of the county, is using it.
Yeah.
So should we not be compensating the school board for that use?
Yeah, on the pickleball court specifically, we spent funding to redevelop some of those, but there's other areas that schools is carrying funding for that we should, and through a lease or MOU or whatever, we should and we will come up with what is the right cost split or cost share so that we're paying, you know, our fair share of the facilities. So we haven't yet because we haven't had that agreement and haven't defined some of that, but yeah, we would and should.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm of the opinion if they never deeded it to us, let them keep the property, and then we just figure out the cost sharing portion, and that would be clean and simple, in my opinion.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Chardine, can you explain the difference, maybe the legal difference between a lease and an MOU, just so we can have clarity on, are we talking semantics here, or is there really a true difference between the two?
I think they would both be very similar, and again, the drafts we've done, a lot of the stuff, whether we own it, you own it, or lease from you, a lot of the systems just by the nature of design can't be separated. The HVAC, the boiler, chiller, all that is for the foreseeable future going to be one system that serves both entities. So it would be addressing those things. How do we share, and not just the utilities, but when those need upgrade or repair, what percentage is borne by the county and what percentage should be for schools?
Yeah, I understand what we're trying to accomplish, either by lease or an MOU, but is there a difference, or are they just synonymous terms? Like, why would we want to do a lease, or why would we want to do an MOU, or are they the exact same thing legally accomplishing the same task?
Yeah, they get to the same end goal. The lease would be if you all retain ownership, then we would do a lease as essentially a tenant of the property. The MOU would be if we own the property, but we still have to work together on those things. Then we just have a mutual agreement for how we're going to do those. But again, the end goal would be the same. The documents, it would be somewhat semantics. They're going to be very similar. There might be a few things that are different if we own versus you, but I'd say probably 90% of the document is going to look the same, whether it says MOU, lease, who owns title to the property.
So would it be the county's suggestion then that we do a lease, since you just said, your words there just led me to believe that your suggestion is that you lease it from the school board. Is that your suggestion versus an MOU?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So when we were talking about transferring the property previously, that's because we thought we were going to be substantially developing more of it. That's not the case currently. It could change one day and we could revisit that. But for now, a lease would cover us. It would keep it simple. It would avoid the cost of having to do a survey. And then if one day you all wanted to expand or do something out here, then we would just have to deed it back to you all. So I think for the foreseeable future, the way we're both using the property is probably to continue. So this would be the simpler. You all just keep the property, we do a lease, and then as things change, we're certainly going to work together and reevaluate that. But I'm not sure there's a compelling interest why we have to hold title to half of the property today.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman? Brett, I need you to help me if this thinking's not correct. We have an asset that currently belongs to the schools, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so, and ostensibly, it belongs to the county. It's a county asset. Are we, if we do a lease, are we not leasing and paying for something that the taxpayers have already spent and bought? And is the lease not tantamount to just a transfer of funds from the county to the schools? I've not seen anything from you in terms of what the lease payment would be. So I don't know, but I assume if it's a lease, there'd be something we would be paying for.
Yeah.
Why are we paying something an asset that the taxpayers already own? It seems counterintuitive to me.
Mr. Chardin, can I chime in? Two different entities, yeah. The residents of the county are the ones who ultimately, I guess, are the ones definitely funding it. But we're talking about two different boards here, two different entities. So the school board owns the property. County, the Board of Supervisors is currently using parts of the property and will continue to do so. But a lease would allow there to be contractual agreement of how that property is going to be used, how the funding for those things are going to be handled. So the county, yes, taxpayers are still funding everything, but there needs to be legal language so that we know how both entities working on the property are going to carry out business.
Dr. Taylor, I thank you, and I understand that. But whether it's a lease or an MOU, we still have the same complications of how to split the baby. We still have the same problems. So they're not going to go away either way.
Sure.
I don't know if anybody here has ever been in a business relationship and leased something to family members or to friends, but I've seen many times they don't work out well over time. And I understand that right now we have great relationships with the schools and the schools with us. But down the road, Dr. Tigan and Brett Chardine may go on to other pastures, or we might have different boards. So to my mind, a clear split, we own, you own, and a very clear split between the two, and do an MOU, I think will prevent conflict down the road. And I've seen leases between friends and loved ones and not work out well over time.
Well, the reason.
The issues are the same between the two. The same complications of how to split things up is still there. But the cleanest way, from my perspective, is to you own this, we own this, done. No leases.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
you could lease it for $1 a year. I just think it's just, however way, the main issue, how I look at this property, we don't need to use it right now. But the county, like it or not, is growing. And there may come a day when we need that property back particularly for school buildings or school use. And once again, as Mr. Chardine said, transferring all these titles back and forth is a lot of extra work. You know, the way I look at it is MOU, lease, whichever is the cleanest legal way to do it, is basically let the county keep using it, and basically we just need you to pay the cost of its operating. We don't want to be paying the utilities on it. We need some kind of agreement on the paving of the parking lot, you know, and that's what we need to figure out, because basically you guys have been using it, I think now for 2 years, and we haven't collected any money for that. That's been coming out of our budget.
Ms. Hurt,
Yes.
I'm not saying that the MOU wouldn't involve some money coming from the county to reimburse the schools for those things, but you just mentioned you could lease it for $1. If that's what you're proposing, then I accept. I accept and I encourage it.
I will not allow that.
Plus expenses.
I didn't think
Plus
you would.
expenses, excuse me,
Yeah,
plus
and-
expenses.
I'm just saying that
And
we're not
back
trying to make a
expenses.
profit off the county. We're just trying to get the cost covered for what we've been paying to take care of it. We just need you guys to pay for that now. Because we can't keep paying for taking care of that. We can't keep having our personnel having to answer fire codes and that sort of thing. So that's the whole intent, is just to take the cost of that property off of our backs and put it where it should be. It's, you know, the county, because it's being used for recreation and stuff.
Please,
Chair.
I have excuse me. I have no objection to us, the county, reimbursing the schools for that. That's just fine. A lease downstream, I would suggest, could end up being problematic.
Okay.
That's all.
I don't know, just whatever legal way is the best to do it, to get the cost of that, you know, the daily operating cost of that property to be covered by you guys and not the school.
Mr.
And
Chair.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Smith,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, first of all, I'd like to ask Dr. Tigan if she has a feeling on the difference between a lease and an MOU. If you'd answer that first.
I'm going to defer to Brett's definition. I mean, I think it's semantic somewhat. I mean, lease usually means someone else owns it and you're living in it. And so, you know, I think the big thing is that there's a misconception that it's about quantity of money that's passing hands just because you're utilizing the building. It truly is about, you know, the cost of operating the building. And so, you know, I'm not sure what term is best used for that. It's, you know, I'd equate this to like where the parents and the 18-year-old, and we've said, now you're going to pay rent because you haven't gotten it, you know, if you want to continue living in our building. You know, but we're doing it, you know, in a loving way. So we're not trying, there's no one, schools or county, who's looking at there's a cost for just having the building. It is literally the cost of operating the building.
Mr. Chairman,
So
Can I
however
ask
best we
Part
do
B?
that.
I'll certainly defer to you.
Part
Warren was
B.
next.
Part B, Can we ask the attorney that's sitting right here?
I was getting ready to do that.
That's what I was going to do. Stole my thunder.
So is this on?
Yep.
Okay. I mean, yes, a lease is more formal than an MOU, but I think it's semantics, like that might not be the right word for what we're trying to do, sounds more like an MOU.
Mr. Chairman?
And if the lease is for $1, then what's the real value of the lease? So I think it is semantics based on the conversation.
Can you ask them?
Ms. Ward was next.
Basically, that's what I was going to do. I was going to ask you as the county attorney to help give a clearer definition for that. But then also, just to reiterate, it's not the fact that, the school and this particular board is wanting to profit from the county, because again, it's just moving one bucket of money back and forth. But basically, it's just the operational expenses of it. So, because currently it is coming out of our budget to rent, to pay for the utilities and maybe parking lot improvements or even snow cleaning and removal and such. But it's an ask to help with to offset some of those expenses so that it's not coming out of our budget, so that we could take that money and refocus it back into our schools as to what we need on the education side.
Mr. Chairman?
No, Ms. Powers.
Whether it's a lease or an MOU, the issues of reimbursing the schools for what we use is the same. And the difficulty of how to split the baby is the same. You generally care for what you own as opposed to what you rent or lease. And I understand when Dr. Tigett, is looking at that dollar bill and she has mandates, unfunded or otherwise, she has mandates, and her primary duty is to educate children, not to care for lacrosse fields or baseball fields or anything like that. So I understand that you put the priorities there, but then something that we are trying to use that falls into disrepair because you can't afford to take care of it. If we own it, we're going to take care of it. We're going to take care of it.
Hey, Mr. Chair,
Then Mr. Kenny.
so let me ask you this. Do we own the county, there's Board of Supervisors, School Board, do we own anything? We don't own anything, do we? We don't own the pickleball courts, we don't own anything. This all belongs to the school board, correct?
The only thing that the Board of Supervisors does own is a year or two ago, we purchased at auction a strip right next here along the parking lot.
Right, but there's no cost associated with that. So if we don't own anything, why can't we just put an earmark or a mandate in our budget that we give the school board every year that this is the cost we're going to give you from the county to maintain this facility? Because we don't have a right, because we don't own anything.
Just wait.
So an MOU would mean that it's a transfer of property.
No, it's just an agreement of how we're,
So that's
how we're
what
gonna
each party's going to do.
Pay for things.
Yeah.
Okay. That's why I was just curious if an MOU would mean that the county would take the property then.
No, typically, I've done several of these school board transfers when an old school is repurposed or something. You declare it surplus, which you guys have done, and then you do the resolution and you do the deed with it. It all goes at the same time. Looks like it got a little confused because it's like half of the property, which,
But I guess I don't understand, if we don't own anything, why we even have to do a lease or an MOU. If the school's got to spend $1 million a year to maintain the property, we just give them an additional $1 million a year in their budget that they request from us, and you're done.
May I?
yes. But
I think part of it is that when you have an MOU in this situation, it would allow you to say, even if it's our property, if Parks and Recs wants the pickleball courts a certain way because, they're looking at tourism and different avenues to bring revenue into our county to help reduce the stress on the taxpayers. And so we want that to happen as much as you all do. And so that maybe part of that MOU could be that those are things that the county maintains to the level they want them maintained for the reason they have them. And so, I think those are all things that we would work out through an MOU. And I think there is collaboration and an understanding of what the goals are, both of Parks and Rec and schools, between, Brett and myself and our teams.
But so the other question then is there is a capital improvement project request from the school for quite a bit of money to tear down part of this facility. So that's,
It's not part of this.
A part of it.
right, but if the school owns, you're still asking for that money from us to pay for that demolition.
We're always asking you for money for capital.
You are our funder.
We're not a taxing, we
I'm just
can't,
trying to, I mean, I agree we need to do that. I'm just trying to keep it as simple as possible without, because we don't own anything. The county doesn't own anything. It all belongs to you guys. We just use some things.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr.
to
Howard.
Mr. Kenny's point, if the MOU would specify that X amount of dollars transferred would be earmarked for, I'm going to just pick one area, field maintenance, and we could monitor that was in fact being spent that way. But we have a facility problem in this county now with schools because those issues were not paid attention to because of that $1 again that the superintendents have passed and the one we have right now has to spend that money on educating the children. So that HVAC system that might be getting shaky, we push it out 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and then we're 15 years out, and now that thing costs $6 million. I just want to make sure that does not happen again, facility-wide, not just for the fields. But that's where, Mr. Kenny, that MOU, if it can earmark the funds and those funds are spent for that purpose, then I don't care who owns the cotton picking property, quite frankly. We just need to make sure that things are taken care of. And historically, that's not been the case.
Mr. Chair, if I could comment on that. Mr. Paris, I agree that there's always going to be a friction when two parties are trying to work together over a piece of property. So regardless of whether we have a lease or an MOU, you own it or we own it, there's always going to be that friction. And so whatever agreement we come to is going to keep us bound to our original agreement.
Hopefully.
Should. And so my suggestion would be for our both staff bodies is that as they're working through all this stuff, that they, and I think they already have been working on this, but delineate who's going to be responsible for what. And my suggestion would be, in regards to the fields themselves, is that be a part of the county's responsibility because our purview, our passion is education and taking care of the fields that are part of our students. And what the rec league uses on these fields back here is currently part of county operations. Not going to be one of our passions, let's be honest about it.
Right.
So I think that should be under the county's purview. Part of our MOU or our lease agreement is that the county's tasked with maintaining the fields up to the levels that you guys deem as necessary. Those are things that our staffs can
I'm
work
with you.
together
I'm with you.
on that.
Question for Ms. Jackson. We could keep ownership exactly the way it is now and sign a memorandum of understanding in terms of the care and feeding. Yes?
Yes.
And so, from my perspective, I hear the motivation of this board, and I understand Beth and Brett also in terms of their motivation. And I just want, my little vote here, I don't care. Keep it the way it is. But I need to see the MOU. Because right now, you're asking me to make decisions about things that I have no information on. If you're just looking for the kind of the head nod of which way the board these two boards want to go, my vote would be to leave it the same and let's bring the MOU on.
I
Yeah,
agree with
and-
that 100%.
yeah,
So
yeah, and that-
The MOU be, it be brought back later for both boards to ratify at one time,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. So with that direction, if that's the direction of both bodies, then, we have the green light to go ahead, fully develop it and bring it back for you all to take a look at and see. So,
If
I
I could-
agree. I think the land should stay with the school.
Yeah, stay
I'm
with,
perfect.
yeah,
So,
just that,
not-
We just
It
gotta
is, 'cause-
come up with what our fair share will be for paying for what we use and what, whatever the MOU says. So who would be in charge of doing MOU, staff and both staffs, or?
yeah, we'll be working together on that, and then along with the county attorney. And once we have something that we think is good and workable, we'll bring it back to both bodies to hopefully adopt.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Powers?
I really appreciate Brett and Beth bringing this back to us, both boards. One of the things I think is important is when a past boards, both of them have a 5-0 vote to do something, to ignore that is a bad precedent. And so I think it's going to be good that these two boards can hopefully vote again 5-0 in favor of what we just are talking about. We can't ignore, I don't think, the votes of two boards, especially when they're by acclamation. So I'm glad to see you're correcting that.
Yeah, and I would just clarify, I would say we have not ignored it. We've made good progress in separating some of the systems that can be separated. So in 2022, the buildings were both, I'd say, fully unified and created a lot of problems and costs. Since then, we've been able to separate some of the utilities, we've improved the fire. So while we haven't deeded the property, we've been doing the work that would need to be done to separate those systems, to simplify the issue, to share
I used
costs.
the wrong
So-
word. I didn't
Sure.
mean to suggest that you were ignoring it, but the issue of the previous two boards said, let's move it over to the county, and we didn't do that. So now we're going to make that an official 5-0 on both boards, which would, I think, right things in my mind.
Yes,
Yeah,
understood and agreed, yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Mr.
question, or, procedural question. Do we need a vote from each
That's what I was
board?
getting to ask our attorney. Do we need a vote? Because the property was never transferred. But
Do we need a,
we need a vote.
A reaffirmation of the
Saying
5-0.
just to get the process going, and then we come back, say, January, and have an official vote of adoption? Okay, so we don't need a vote. Good.
Okay.
Let's go reduce that. That's good. Would you like a question? I'm sorry. Does anybody have anything else to add? I got another pair too. All right. So I think we got that straight for now, till we get the MOU done, so. That brings us to our second public comment period. No one has signed up. So I will close the public comment period. Superintendent comments.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been involved with this process, especially with related to the PLC. I think we are a great example, and I applaud you for that. Those of you up there as elected officials for being able to work together and resolve situations in an amenable fashion. I really appreciate that, because as our kids watch some of this, as they're studying government, I want them to see that this is how effective boards work. So just thank you for that as the superintendent. I will also share that as we continue, just as things coming up in the near future, at our November 12th school board meeting, there'll be an update on assessment and accreditation as we try to grapple and work through what is proposed as the new accreditation model from the state. We will also be bringing some changes to what we call the VAP program, which is the Virginia Alternative Assessment Program, that is really the assessment of our students that have significant cognitive disabilities and how that process is changing, that will definitely have probably a negative impact on our schools, as well as we're concerned about the impact on our students when we're asking them to do things that they might not be capable of doing. And also for what the public might be very concerned with is what the 25-26 school calendar for first read will be coming back in November. So we invite others to come and join us for those conversations and become involved. And I'm going to make one more shameless plea for our advisories that we are looking for citizens, parents, employees to be a part of our advisories, whether it's for the career and workforce development, whether it's for Title I, our gifted, our special education. We need people to be involved, and all of the information is online. It gives information about each one of those advisories. I believe I left out the health advisory, but they're all available online with the description and the meeting dates, and our board members are a part of most of those advisories. We have at least one school board member that comes to those meetings regularly. So it's a way to get involved. So if you know of any from those of you on the Board of Supervisors, if you have neighbors, please suggest they look into that to help support schools and our children.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also say the CWD advisory eats well at those meetings. The food's really good.
Thank you, Beth.
That's a fact.
County Administrator comments?
Yeah, looks like Will's working on the MOU already back there. We'll get back, yeah. I'd like to echo the superintendent's comments on just working together and commending you all. VACO, with their executive director being here, they've been doing a series of learning sessions where they have a couple hours for county administrators and board members to come in and focus on a particular topic. And the one last month I attended was school and Board of Supervisors working together. And yeah, honestly, didn't learn a whole lot because every single thing they're saying was like, we're already doing that, we're already doing that, we're already doing that. And hearing some of the stories from other localities there, what they're struggling with, what their relationships are with their school staff or with their school board members. It's like, we just have it so fortunate here for the relationship that we have, and that doesn't happen by accident. And it makes it, makes the job more enjoyable, but it also, results in better education and more efficient use of funds. And so there's real tangible benefits to why we work together like this. So again, sometimes we get siloed and just look at ourselves, but it was good to step out of that, hear from localities from across Virginia and be like, we really are doing well. Then just one update for you all. So we've been talking about doing a borrowing interim financing to do some improvements for the HVAC high school and elementary school. We put those out to bid, a package of both 8.3 million and then another one, an alternative at 11.3 million. So the banks have been looking at that. We expect those to come back next week. So pretty soon we'll be able to follow up with you all with what the rates are, what the terms are. The board should be looking at that at their October meeting, and then it'll be back on your agenda as well as school board to endorse whatever package the board may choose to go after. But that's continuing to move along, and we'll know more on that hopefully next week to share with you. And that's all I have this evening.
Turn it over to me.
Yep.
All right, do we have board comments?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Ward?
I would like to thank both my fellow school board members and officers and along with the Board of Supervisors. I do believe that we have a great synergy that we're working together, and certainly definitely appreciate our superintendent and our county administrator. And welcome, county attorney. It's so wonderful to be able to have someone right there that we can ask these questions. So I'm really appreciating that move. On what we've learned this afternoon, just a couple of comments. With, of course, our legislation, there's so much there that, when the state mandates and/or federal mandates to us to the local localities as to how to spend the money. I really hope that, that synergy will continue through legislative as well to let us have more control on our local level, as to how we spend the money and recognize the needs that we have. And I'm definitely in support of the school construction financing, that 1% sales tax. I think, I like the fact that it has a cap on it. It's only 20 years. It's not meant to be indefinite, but that way that we can use those funds appropriately. And then, of course, on the wellness side as well, is to try and keep our students both, as healthy as we can, not only physically, but also emotionally. As our superintendent spoke, it's a really thin line. I believe we should be focusing on education, not necessarily all of the psychiatric pieces that belong or that our children and youth are going through right now. But at the same time, we have to have a balance so that the children can be in an environment or be ready to learn. But I don't want us to get too deep into that. So my comment on that would be to be very cautious. Let the professionals, again, I'm an RN by trade. I know how a physical therapist is going to come in and give orders. I know how to give PT therapy to a patient. I can assist with that. Respiratory therapist, the same as, but staying in my lane is my number one focus. So education, we need to stay in that lane as our number one focus, but again, still recognize how we can help a little bit on some of those things. And I guess with the first responder, Brett Chardon, it's a little dear to my heart. I have a son that's a police officer here in the county and a daughter that's actually a 911 dispatcher supervisor in our county. And so I see the turmoil between the two. When they were young, they would argue over who was more important. And, I, of course, always speak, the first responder is truly the the 911 dispatcher truly is the first responder, because as they're having to talk through to get someone there, to keep that person alive, or to help keep them safe. So as much as we can do there, I really appreciate that for that. And I believe that would be it, because I love to speak.
Mrs. Wade, do you have any comments?
I just want to say thanks for working together, and it's been nice working with all of you guys so far, so.
Mrs. Smith?
I do have one little bit of comment. When the comment was made about historically not the case that we take care of our buildings, I really wanted to put my boxing gloves on and go at some ears, but I will refrain from that. And my second thought, go with that we need to not continue to rehash the past, but we have got to move forward to ensure that both boards are working together for the best that we can provide for our students, our staff, and our community. And I thank y'all for being here at our lovely facility today.
Mrs. Hurt?
I want to piggyback on what Mrs. Smith just said, which makes me really happy how we are functioning together. We can't look back. We can't undo in the past what maybe was not done correctly, or the two boards didn't work together. We have to look forward to the future, and I think we're definitely on the right path to do that. And because our goal of both boards is to deliver the best life for the citizens of Powhatan County. And I think that's just what we're trying to do. And how we chop up the money to pay for this or that, it's not really an argument or a point of contention. It's just trying to do the most efficient, effective way to handle that. So I really commend that all of us, that we know each other and we work hard together to deliver on that, what's best for all the citizens of Powhatan County, both school, and let's not look back, let's look forward so that we can be that shining county on the hill.
I have no further comments to add to any of that. It's all good, but it's been a good evening, so thank you guys for working together. Mr. McClung?
Board of Supervisors comments.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
I just have a couple. First of all, I want to thank staff for always setting this stuff up for us. You guys are so appreciated, keeping the sound going and just keeping us organized with the water and everything else. Also, fellow board members as well, but please make sure the kids who did those cards get a big thank you from us, because they were adorable.
I want to display them somewhere.
I
I think we
something,
need to put them at the admin building. We don't
So-
get much love, and it was pretty good right there. A lot of thank yous, and a lot of love in here.
Yeah, please make sure that class
Positive things.
gets thanked. I like how they put Board of Supervisors with the exception of Robert. I did like that comment. That's all I have.
Any more?
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Mr. Powers.
The relationships that we've applauded and how we're getting along as a school board and a county is attributable to the folks at the top setting the standard. And I want to thank you, Brett, and you, Beth, for being that example. And I just genuinely appreciate you both for that, because I think it bleeds down into the both boards as you all get along and do what's best for the kids and for the citizens of this county. So thank you very much.
Anyone else?
I have my boxing gloves on also.
You might lose. You might lose.
Mr. Chair,
I would just like to say.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead. Denise.
I've been quiet because I have laryngitis, but I think this is just the most wonderful group of people, not just a board and not just a school, not just superintendents, not just people that help us with what we do. I think we're a great group of people, and I am so proud to be one of them.
Bill, do you have anything?
I've been so good. I've been talking so much. You sure you want to hear from me? No, it's been a great meeting. So yeah, I don't have anything to add. A lot of dittos. Yeah.
Again, I'd like to thank was it sixth graders that did the cards? Right, whoever did it. Fifth grade? Fifth grade. Awesome. I really do think we should display them somewhere at the admin building. So they really are nice cards. I've read them twice. I was like, yes, that's good. So enjoyed everybody working together. And the only thing I have to say is we are Powhatan or we are one. So we've had it said at several meetings. So we are one. So I think appreciate it, what everybody does. We're waiting on the MOU. Meeting adjourned.